Christian, thanks so much for talking with me today.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Mm. Now, I wanted to start our conversation off and learn about your story, particularly as it relates to being in the neurodivergent community. Where did that begin?
Ooh, once upon a time. uh, well, I really have to go back to day one when I was born, really, because, being neurodivergent myself, but of course, not knowing anything about it at the time, but also growing up with a father who was very clearly neurodivergent, highly sensitive person, lots of sensory challenges, and then a mom who was, I'm not sure exactly, but she had a lot of anxiety, a lot of social anxiety, and she may have been an empath or who knows, and so growing up in that environment, that was my normal. So it took me a while to realize that not every family functioned that way, and and then it was really not until I then, or I guess another step along the way to realizing what was going on for me was my first year in a business major, where I realized I was bored to death, was not connecting with any of my professors' classes, and I thought, well, what is it that I want to do when I grew up? I thought that was it, and the epiphany at the time was I want to help people. So that was very vague, but that's as good as I could do it, and then that led me to deciding to switch majors and to enroll in an occupational therapy major and become an occupational therapist. So it's really not until later on that I became an occupational therapist that I started connecting all those dots of, oh, I'm relating a lot to a lot of the clients I'm working with. And some of it was with my own challenges, and some of them were challenges that I recognized in my parents. So that's kind of like really what started the whole thing.
Now, being neurodivergent myself, I'm very aware of the neurodiverse experience here in the United States, but I always love learning about the neurodivergent experience in other countries and cultures. So I know you lived in France. What was your experience there like as it relates to your neurodivergent identity?
Sorry about that.
You're right.
I'm dying over here. Last thing you want to get on the recording, but just need a second. Sorry about that. At the time that I lived in France, I guess the best way to put it is I didn't have a neurodivergent identity because no one was talking about it. Some of it was I think the culture, some of it was the time, some of it was, it's not something that people talked about. And what shaped my identity at first was more of the negative feedback, was the way people described me or made comments about me is, oh, Christian is talks too much to his peers in the class. Christian is too forgetful. Christian needs to try harder. Christian needs to push himself more. Christian is too impulsive. Christian is too shy. And so that's really what started out shaping my identity, because there was no other point of reference. There was no other framework. The point of reference was, well, when you asked to do X, Y, Z, you should be able to do it that way. And so if you couldn't do it that way, then of course you became a problem. And so it's kind of like how it started out. And then, I would say that overall there was probably a pace of life in France that was a lot slower than in the US. So sometimes it's characterized in a negative way as, oh, people are lazy or they don't want to work, which is of course, absolutely not true, but there was less focus on working all the time and more focus on quality of life. More focus on the time to eat, the time to take breaks, the time to socialize, the time to take vacations. And those were very, very important things that everybody, not just neurodivergent people, but everybody talked about. And so, and with my father having a lot of sensitivity issues, had to find ways to be okay. And he knew had to be okay, but it included a lot of slowing things down and not scheduling as many activities for the family, or making sure they were longer transitions, that he wasn't rushed into things. That means that, we wouldn't rush as a family. So a lot of what helped me, helped me without even me knowing it at the time. And then when, I realized years later that, oh, that was actually what my father was doing without even realizing it himself. But that's, and that's a lot of what I started just internalizing. And so I would say, those were things that, were a little different from growing up in France.
Now you live here in the United States presently. What have you seen and experienced in terms of the differences in the quality of life for neurodivergent people here in the United States as compared to France?
Good question. It's one thing that I somehow witnessed, I think, was the emergence of the neurodiversity movement. And so I believe it started in the US, but it's a lot, even though we have such a long way to go in the US, it's a few million years ahead compared to where France is at. And there's just not a lot of recognition of neurodiversity, even amongst mental health providers. There's still the very prevalent impact of psychoanalysis, which was, more of a old way of doing psychotherapy, and it, still has value, but that's often still what the way some providers, mental health providers, approach neurodiversity. That, it has to do with attachment to the mother, or lack of attachment, or and things that we know now are not true and are not accurate. And so, seeing that there's definitely a lot more services available, in addition to more knowledge, more understanding, a lot more services available in the US. And but I would say another difference on the negative side would be that there is not enough emphasis on quality of life. So that's not necessarily specific to neurodivergence, but the way our culture operates in the US is, with the really huge emphasis on productivity, on working, on defining ourselves through our work achievements, and with less emphasis on quality of life and mental health, and so that's some of what I've experienced being here.
Right now in my life, I'm really trying to kind of honor my limitations. So I'm curious about, hearing about your father and hearing about the quality of life. I'm wondering what kind of impact has that had on you in terms of how you live your life every day?
It took me a while to realize what my father was doing, and how essential it was to his quality of life, to managing his neurodivergence. And so, in my 20s, like a lot of people in their 20s, I was more focused on what was going on the outside than on the inside. But then gradually I started realizing that, oh, I get dysregulated easily. I get stressed easily. I need more time to transition. Sometimes, I love music and gatherings, but there are times when I'm also very noise sensitive, where I need to pay attention to the amount of noise in the environment, and then of course having ADHD, there's a lot of things affect my ability to focus or to regulate my attention. And so really it had to do with, in terms of setting limitations, that I had to go through a stage of really becoming more self-aware and really understanding me and understanding how my neurodivergence affected me. And you know, this is never a linear process. It's not like you learn one and then you learn, you know, it's just, it comes and goes in different layers. And you know, some of it I realized that, oh yeah, I need more time to transition, or if I don't, I get really stressed out and then I don't process information as well, and I can't be as present, or I may miss some information. And then there were times where I realized, oh yeah, that's probably tied to my neurodivergence. But, you know, so then it started making me want to research more about different neurodivergent conditions. And so it, you know, it took a while, but basically becoming more intentional. It was, you know, two parallel roads in a sense, where one was about self-awareness and learning, understanding myself the best I could. And then the other piece was, well, how, you know, what can I do about it to honor those needs? So a lot of intentionality. And so, yeah, so today you know, these days I'm very intentional about how I schedule my time. I do a lot of, you know, planning ahead of time of, you know, if I'm considering and anything, I'm looking at how it's going to match my needs, and it's just the best way to use my energy.
You were talking earlier how business necessarily wasn't your jam, and you ended up getting a degree in occupational therapy. And from my understanding, you're not currently an occupational therapist, but I'm wondering in what ways did kind of that education regarding the connection of the body and mind from occupational therapy, and how that framework has helped you to this day?
It helped me tremendously. Because again, I when I started working as an occupational therapist, and I was 23, and I was beginning this self-awareness journey, self-discovery journey, but I had no idea that I was neurodivergent. So the occupational therapy framework gave me some language to articulate some concepts that I wasn't aware of. And, you know, it gave me language to describe some of what I was feeling and some of my processes. And then seeing neurodivergence in real life with my clients, with a lot of the kids that I was working with, and recognizing myself in some of those kids or some of those behaviors, helped me become more self-aware. I thought, oh, I do this. Oh, my dad has that challenge. And so it just, you know, it just helped me to connect a lot of dots. And then I think somehow, probably because of my dad, how my dad was, you know, managing his own life, that it always, the OT profession always helped me to go beyond the behavior. So whenever, you know, the classic scenario was parents would contact me and say, well, my child has these problems, a lot of behavior problems. So we need to, you know, we need to address that. We don't know how to do it. And for me, there was always a push in terms of understanding what was driving the behavior. And I think because of the conditions that I grew up in, I knew that, well, if we were, as a family, we were outside on a day that was too windy, my dad would get dysregulated and he would say, oh, let's go indoors, or, you know, let's go to a different place because it's too windy, and he would get really cranky. So I knew that his crankiness had a reason, and it's not because he was a bad person. It's not because, so I think it just helped me connect some dots. So I always looked for ways to understand the kids that I was working with, and to bridge the gap with the parents, because often the parents were, you know, they were just frustrated, they were overwhelmed, they didn't know how to best support their kids. So and sometimes, you know, they had the mindset of, we need to stop that behavior, where I would come in and say, well, let's first find out why this behavior is happening. Is it because of smells? Is it because of noise? Is it because of the blankets? Is it because of, the textures of the food? Is it because of, the transitions? And then we could find ways to support the child better. So I think that helped me a lot. And it really gave me a new framework to understand my own neurodivergence in a sense.
Now, you're currently a life and parent coach. What made you decide you wanted to kind of pivot from being an occupational therapist and into being a life coach?
It was a gradual process, but for a long time, I had started feeling like the parents were not getting enough support. So the model was very much the clinical model, the medical model that's still very much in use, but it was about, okay, therapize that child as much as possible, and then everything will be fine. And then everybody will be happy. And of course, it just doesn't work that way. And so, I would have great results with the kids I worked with, but I could still see that it wasn't enough to make things work for the whole family. And there was never really no one was really asking to the parents, how's the therapy working for the whole family? And it was just looking at the child in isolation and not within the context of the family. So that was my main and first motivation to move into parent coaching, to kind of like flip my services. Instead of focusing so much on the child, focusing on empowering the parents with information, empowering the parents with a different perspective, and empowering the parents with strategies that could help not just their child, but could help them, in the process. And then, I really wanted to take my message to a broader audience, because I worked for over 30 years as an occupational therapist, and I loved it, and I was good at it, but it felt like I had accumulated so much knowledge and understanding and perspective that I wanted to support more people, and I wanted to get this message out. And it was never about the money for me. It was never about, how can I monetize this and make loads of money? It was, well, how can I share this message so that more people will benefit from it, and people that I may never interact with, or that may never, work with directly, but so getting on social media and finding a way to share my message, even starting my YouTube channel, which is very, very, very new, but it's one way that where I feel like, okay, I can reach more people that way and share some information. It might be just a little nugget of it, but it might inspire someone to look for more information. So those were some of the main reasons. And then of course, to keep learning and growing. And I think having ADHD makes me more at risk for seeking that novelty all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I think there was probably that dynamic too, where I felt like, okay, I need something new. I've been doing this for over 30 years and I'm really good at it, but what else can I do and still fulfill this mission that I have of making the world a better place?
Another experience that can help more people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, I read where you said that coaching shouldn't be about working on fixing your child, that you give a roadmap to help parents succeed. Can you talk about how you support parents in developing this roadmap?
Sure. I always insist on figuring out the family culture first, because I want to make sure that my services are going to support the entire family and are going to work for the entire family. So, based on the family culture, based on the family's resources, based on the family's time availability, whatever the situation is, or learning style, and whether there are siblings or not, and how to include the siblings, and so the main three prongs that I always look at is I want to make sure that my services are family centered, so looking at the whole family, that they're that it's relationship based, because I think we're too often looking for gimmicks, for quick fixes, and for someone else to fix that person, the child, whatnot. And I really believe that, you know, the parents have this immense power to inspire and guide their child through their relationship. But often when I come into a family, the relationship has deteriorated a bit. So there'll be situations where, you know, the parents acknowledge that there were a lot of power struggles. There's, you know, there's resentment. There's you know, they're tired of repeating themselves over and over. And so I work on, you know, finding ways to restore that relationship so that there's a lot more positives than negatives. And then the, you know, my third can't think of the word, principle concept that I always focus on is to have a neurologically based approach, because we know that with neurodivergence, you know, it's not a matter of not wanting to do it, or, you know, character, or it's because of how our brain is wired. So so in addition to understanding the family dynamic and using the relationship to restore peace, you know, also always look at things from a neurological perspective. So having been an OT for so long, at bringing the sensory perspective, sensory processing perspective, that in my eyes is always so essential with so many neurodivergent conditions, you know, whether it's autism, ADHD, or you know, highly sensitive individuals. And I'm still, you know, I'm still surprised that there's so many people who are neurodivergent who have never heard of the sensory processing framework. And it's given me so much, you know, so many tools and such helpful perspective, not just for me, but to, you know, with the people I work with, or the people I interact with, because once they truly understand self-regulation, not just from a cognitive standpoint, but once they understand, oh, this is how I feel when I'm self-regulated. This is how I feel when I'm dysregulated. These are the things that are impacted, you know, my processing speed and my relationships and my motivation and my mood and my sleep, and just all of that, you know, can be, you know, very affected by regulation or dysregulation. So that's one piece that I always address.
So for me, I think being autistic, one part of I think something that's really related to that identity is the need for autonomy. And I, you know, just hearing you talk about the power struggles between the parents and child, how much of it do you look at the autonomy piece of it as an aspect of the relationship not being as strong as it could be?
What do you, in which context do you mean autonomy?
For the child being able to make their own decisions and choices.
I think it's always, you know, where I start with that is, let's say, you know, it's hard to talk about it in broad terms, but looking at, for example, at behavior challenges, parents often get into a power struggle with, you know, telling the child what they need to do. The child refuses or has a meltdown. So the place where I always start is, well, let's understand why the child is refusing to do this, or why the child wants to do X, Y, Z instead. Because the mindset is often, well, but they can't do that right now. That's not appropriate. But until we really understand what is the motivation, because if the child's motivation is, you know, they're melting down because they're refusing to go to school, maybe they got a new game that they absolutely love and they really want to stay home to play that game. So, you know, that's a different approach than if they don't want to go to school because there's a new teacher and they're freaking out about, interacting with a new teacher. So, each one is going to create a different approach. So in order to really honor the child's identity, individuality and create autonomy, we need to start by understanding the child's motivation better. And so that can be, it can be a tough topic for parents, even on the, many parents will have certain ideals for their child or certain concepts of what would be good hobbies, what would be good activities for their child, but the child may not take to it, obviously. And so really finding ways, whether it's helping the child to find ways to have time on their own, have breaks. What would they like to do on their break? I still see a lot of cases through, whether it's from the parents or whether it's through teachers, where the child is told exactly what they need to do on their break. And how would we feel if we're told, okay, you need a break, okay, but not do absolutely,
I hate it. I'd absolutely hate it.
Of course, and so this would be, this would be a small example of how I would work on it, but really helping the parents to do a lot of detective work and shift that perspective on when my child should be able to do X, Y, Z to, well, how can I support my child to do X, Y, Z, and what do they need to feel good? What do they need to, be engaged? What do they need to be motivated? And sometimes, what children need to be motivated is to be able to contribute more to the decision-making process, or to, have more choices in what they're doing.
And how can people that are watching this interview right now learn about the coaching you provide, Christian?
Well, if they are on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and I create a lot of content on a daily basis. So that's always a good place. People can get to know me there, or send me a direct message on LinkedIn, or through my website. It's lifeguidecoaching.org, or have a YouTube channel. I have no idea what the name is. It's a bunch of letters and characters, but if you search my name or my LinkedIn profile, usually on social media, I come up with the YouTube channel, or and then my email, it's christian@lifeguidecoaching.org. So those are good places to reach me.
Well, Christian, I really appreciate your time. It was wonderful getting to know you a little bit better.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity, Doug, and appreciate all the questions, good questions, and I hope this inspires other people to just keep searching for information and